Welcome back to another episode of From Tailors with Love. I'm joined by friend of the show and friend in real life, Betsy Heimann. How are we doing today, Betsy?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Oh, good as gold. Betsy, today you had a great idea for a topic for a podcast, and this is going to be a bit costume 101 for me. You said we should talk about the differences between, say, the hero suit, the standing suit, the fighting suit, because they're all essentially the same suit, but there has to be different interpretations and variations. So maybe you can just touch upon that. What discerns a lot?
Well, a standing suit is the suit the actor, my reference for this is Rush Hour 3, but it's a pretty consistent, and way to approach it. So I approach it as a suit. Perhaps some other designers that do superheroes approach it as a cape.
Ah, okay.
Because you have a standing cape, you have a flying cape, they do different things. So you want to have, your suit is what it appears in most of the scenes of the show. But then if you are in a big fight, there are alterations made to the suit. You put a gusset, let's say, for example, under, like right here, so that when I punch you, I don't rip the armhole out of the jacket. But the rest of the time, you have a nice, sleek sleeve. But for punching, you've got a gusset. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes. To reinforce certain parts that will get stressed in a fight.
Yes, and the same with the legs. Nowadays, there are stretch in wools and suitings, and men's suitings do come with some stretch, which is helpful. But I would assume that even with pants, with kicking and stuff, you have to put some hidden gussets, let's say. It's the mastery of tailoring, so that you can kick.
Right.
And then you have the suit on a wire. So if you have to dangle from the side of the building, you need a harness. You need to cut through the suit to attach the wires. So you need the suit on the wire.
That is crazy. How do you know?
For hanging, if you hang somebody, you've got to make alterations to the suit so that they don't really hang themselves. That might be an alteration to the shirt. I'm trying to think of any of the others. Those that's just basically it. They're just, I shouldn't probably be telling this, but there's certain action films that require alterations to the garments to allow ease of action.
Right. And how do you manage, if you're putting like extra bits and bobs in, gussets or padding, are you very conscious that you have to have it look the same in terms of the fit as well? Do you kind of reference it?
Hopefully what happens is that if they're in a suit, as Jackie Chan was in, and Chris was in a suit too, Chris Tucker, you assume that part of the movie is going to be happening very fast because it's a fight. So you're not going to see. Yes, it's got to be the same fabric. It has to be put in expertly. It has to have, even in the Tomorrow War, I made the military uniforms of the future out of a stretch Japanese cotton ripstop. So they could bend, so that the fabric went with them. We had Navy SEALs, where some of our stuntmen were Navy SEALs, and they loved those pants. And they asked if they could take those pants because they could bend down on their knees. And as I told you before, the padding was inside, so you couldn't see it on the outside. It was so, as we go further with technology and fabrics, you don't have to do as much. You can create your garment or your costume out of a fabric that has some stretch if it's appropriate. If it's a superhero, the fabric's all stretch, basically.
Right.
But I'm talking about just modern film or period, whatever film. You need a good tailor. You know, for
Right.
Jackie Chan, I got the tailors at Giorgio Armani to do that for me.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a great scoop.
Yeah, Giorgio, I've had well, I used to do, first I started in period films, then I went to all those modern Get Shorty, you know, Jerry Maguire films, and then I went back to the period films. But I had a very good relationship with Mr. Armani and his brand
Uh-huh.
for a number of years. He made a lot of things for me special, you know. And I went to, we shot Rush Hour 3, a lot of it in Paris, and I went to Paris to fit Jackie. And Armani, Mr. Armani sent a tailor over from Milan.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's
And he
great.
gave me my choice of fabrics, and I gave him my drawings for the suits. So they made the suits for me for Jackie Chan. But they also made what we call the stunt suits, which are the suits you're making your inquiries about.
And Jackie Chan. Now, I interviewed, I think it's Alex Bavard, her name was. She did the suits for The Foreigner with Pierce Brosnan and Jackie Chan. And she said Jackie Chan was just a laugh riot in the fittings because he would come with a huge entourage and he'd also improvise around some of the outfits. Like he would take a detachable hood, for example, and go, right, I can use this as a weapon. I can hoodwink someone else and bring them to my knee. Was he good in the fittings? Was he quite a fun guy to work with?
Oh yeah, he's lovely. He's great. And then we would go on a location. They took me with them to the location scout of the Eiffel Tower, and he literally freaked everybody out because he literally like saw, oh yeah, I can step here and I can hang off the Eiffel Tower, and he's hanging out there, you know. And then, and then when we got to the part where he was going down to the basement, he said to me, "You stay here." And I was like, what do you know, I was really put off by that. I went, you know, like, what are you talking about? You stay here. And so I sat on the bench and I waited for them all to come back up the step. And apparently there was a near accident with one of the crew guys down there. And he came up the stairs and he looked at me. He said, "I told you it was dangerous."
Oh, wow.
So he's looking out for me.
Oh, that's sweet.
He's a really great guy. He was so great, so generous. Oh my God, so generous.
Yeah. Oh, well, he's a lot of fun in his movies. I mean, I first saw him in Rumble in the Bronx, I think, and I got into a cinema screening not knowing anything about him. And then saw all the outtakes after the film, saw him break his foot jumping from a boat to a bridge and whatnot. And just said, he's the real deal. And he sounds like that in real life as well. Do you go for the same team all the time? I mean, we had Dan Moore on a couple of days ago. He worked with you in Green Book, and Juliana Hoffpower, I think, has worked with you on Green Book. Do you kind of handpick a few people, your team around you, or does it kind of just?
I handpick the assistant costume designer and the costume supervisor, and you can't always get the people. I mean, like I wanted my costume supervisor from the Tomorrow War to be on this next project because, you know, she enjoyed the experience, but she was she's doing something else, you know, because it's been COVID, nobody's been working. I don't go from movie to movie to movie.
Yeah.
I just don't. Um, it's not that I can't, I have, but why?
Well, I mean, it
I
was.
have to go play with Roger in the park, you know. Honestly, I'm not being serious here. So you can't always keep your crew together because they do like to keep working.
Yeah.
They should do as they wish, you know.
Yeah. I mean, so it was like Green Book, I think was 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And so tomorrow, yeah. So yeah, you do have to, you take a little slice out every now and again.
Well,
To make good.
Juliana became a designer almost immediately after Green Book. I don't know what happened or how that happened. She was not designing yet when we were doing Green Book.
Right. Interesting. So
She
yeah.
was the head of all the background fitting. She was a big help to me. And Dan Moore put the crew together for me in New Orleans. And he did me a favor because I was in trouble and I called him and he, you know, he was in retirement and he came out for me. And I just think because we go back so far back together, not having ever worked together, but brushing up against each other wherever, you know, wherever we were. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. And he put a genius crew together for me for Green Book. I mean, I just walked right into heaven. So.
Oh, he was so great. He was so much fun to have on the show. When I reached out to Dan, uh, I said, look, it'd be great. It'd be a privilege to speak to you and whatnot. He sent back a personal email that was like 4,000 words long, you know, and had everything from his kind of biography and what we should talk about. And he was just so much fun to have on the show. I really enjoyed speaking to Dan.
And he was a big support to all the designers that he worked for, because he was a designer in his own right, but he just was a supervisor too. And I think at times that was very frustrating for him. And I'm glad that he did have an opportunity to be a designer. He worked as a supervisor for me on Green Book and for a lot of those designers. But I'm glad I think a lot of times that was a frustrating experience for him. So I'm glad that as time went on, he got to be the designer too, It was good.
Oh, he was great. He was great. Well, Betsy, I'm going to let you get on with your life. You've got a life outside of this, I know. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I did have one last question tangentially. You know how I like to always blindside you with
Go for it. I'm
ready. Okay, so I've been getting into Hannibal massively with Mads Mikkelsen of late. And I know I'm very late in the game. I'm the last guy to watch it, but I know you did Red Dragon. So I was wondering, had you kept a close eye on Hannibal and the suits, and did you manage to catch any of the series?
He is so great, that Mads Mikkelsen. I watched 2 episodes and it was so freaky, creepy. I would like to watch more, but I won't sleep at night. Honestly, that guy freaks me out. I mean, even in that Another Round movie, there's just something about his face. He's so sympathetic, and as Hannibal, you were like, oh my God, he really could do it. This guy could really do it.
He's terrifying, very nuanced, so does a lot without doing much. But the suits look terrific. Anastasia, I think, lasted all of 10 minutes before she saw some guy hung on an antler, like on the wall.
I'm with Anastasia. Life is too short to have that stuff rummaging around in your brain.
So
what was your question?
I was just wondering if you had any idea, if you had any opinions on some of the styling of Red Dragon, knowing that you've, on Hannibal.
Red Dragon. That was great. That was such a marvelous experience. My magic for me takes place in the fitting room. And the great thing was having Sir Anthony Hopkins in the fitting room, and he was just so nice. He's just such a gentleman. He's a very personable guy. And I said, well, here it is. You want to put it on? It was not the exact jumpsuit because it was years later, but a version. And he did. He wanted to put it on. And he put it on and he looked in the mirror. He stood there. I'm sure you've heard these stories from other designers. And he just stood there, and he turned around, and oh my God, my beloved Autumn, she was with me for years and years until she became a mom. She was the assistant costume designer. He just said something to her, just like Hannibal Lecter. She went white as a ghost, terrified. She totally lost her cool. I mean, for real. He took a minute, but it was good for him too, because he needed to bring it back.
Yeah.
And oh God. And oh my God.
I'm glad.
It was so scary.
Yeah, I would have asked for about 10 to 20 people to be in that room just for safety, because you don't want to be in one.
3 of us were in there, I think, 3 of us. But I have that memory, and of course I loved Edward Norton and Ray Fiennes. I mean, come on.
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Emily, oh my God, Emily's so wonderful.
Yeah.
She's so wonderful. And it was 1980s, and I called up, it was my first time getting acquainted with this wonderful woman. She has a company called To the Moon Alice. Her name is Alice. And she's got a warehouse in upstate New York. And this was the early days of her having this place. And I was in LA, boxes. She helped me on Green Book too. You just call and say, okay, it's it's 1962. And you send pictures, boxes and boxes. And we made a whole 1980s boutique in the warehouse, in our stage that we had at Universal, our, costume shop. and for
And she,
samples, for background. And then we had Phil Hoffman, come on,
oh,
And
he's so
Phil and
good.
I had done Almost Famous together. And he was so funny. He was just like, I loved him. There's another one.
Yeah. No,
But, you couldn't ask for more on Red Dragon. You had all these heavy, Emily Watson. I couldn't place her last name for a minute. Forgive me.
yeah, no.
But she was amazing. But Rafe was really open. I was in this thing in those days. Well, he's a weirdo. He doesn't really go out shopping, so he must order online. And he's a little AD, OCD, whatever it was. I don't know those terms. And I said, what it might be interesting is if he has a uniform, and that he just wears so he doesn't get flustered by oh my God, the blue is the wrong color or something. And so he liked that. And I said, so what do you think about just ordering Dickies? Just ordering from the Sears catalog. And he loved that. And that's what he wore.
Right.
So they were just such great characters to mess around with. And yeah, Edward and I are still like, it's always great to see him.
Yeah, he was Will Graham. He was less neurotic. I mean, the kind of new Hannibal has I think Hugh Dancy is the guy's name, British guy.
Different actor. There you go.
Yeah, but the Will Graham, the Edward Norton Will Graham was kind of had this more kind of precise but less freneticism, if that's a thing, than the current Will
Yeah,
Graham.
I think he was a guy. I mean, the way Edward played it was like he was a guy that was ready to face his fears. He had the fears. There's no doubt that he had fears, but he had moved to Florida. He'd moved to safety. He was getting drug into this, and okay, he's much more stoic, I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love Red Dragon. I think I'm gonna have to go watch that right now. Maybe I'll I'll get through all the Hannibals whilst Anastasia is away. There was one episode where I couldn't even let her upstairs. She was coming upstairs. Some poor guy was getting mutilated, and I said, "You better just stay down there for another 10 minutes because this is pretty horrible." It's some of the. It's really. I mean, I don't think you would have been able to put this stuff on TV circa mid-90s. I mean, this is just. It's really, really well done, but it's especially graphic.
But when was it made?
So Hannibal was 2013, I think.
Oh, really?
And I think the second series a couple of years after.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was much older than that.
Yeah, I oh really? I thought it was actually a bit.
I have no idea. I just assumed,
Well,
what year did we make Red Dragon? Was that in the 90s?
No, I think that was 2002 for Red Dragon.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
I'll fix that in post, but I think that was for 2002. Yeah, thank you for indulging me, Betsy, as always.
Did it answer your question? They had to do with suits. I don't think anybody had a suit in Red Dragon in my movie, but
okay.
toodles.
All right, Betsy. Thanks so much for taking time out. Speak to you soon.
Pleasure's mine. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.